There's a thing called Scott's Law, and Scott's Law, it's a very opaque theory, which is that there's a transaction that happens between people, and originally the people are the most important part of the transaction. But once there's a problem in the transaction, the focus shifts so that the transaction is more important and the people become secondary. And I think the transaction in conspiracy theory is what we're talking about, or conspiracies, is the transaction of the information becomes the most important, and the cognitive abilities to be able to discern whether it's factual or has some real-time benefit becomes secondary.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who is out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode. Hello, this is Bob Nickman. Welcome to The Exploding Human. That gentleman you heard at the beginning is ALAN LIEBERT, my resident therapist. I think this is his fourth or fifth episode. We come up with these little topics that we like to talk about, and this one is about the psychology of conspiracy theories. More about that in a second. But first, I want to invite you to visit my website, theexplodinghuman.com, theexplodinghuman.com, and you can see photos of all my guests, synopses of the episodes, and listen to the episodes. Little bio on myself if you're interested, and also a donate button if you'd like to support the show. That would be really great. Thank you. And also subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is, of course, free. That is The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman. Add the with Bob Nickman. Today's show is sponsored by Hero Soap Company, HEROSOAP Company.com. Go to them, and they make the best handmade natural soaps, which are infused with essential oils. You feel like when you shower with them, you could actually eat them. I just did a little shower this morning with the spearmint, and I feel great. It's very natural and subtle, and you feel just great. Your skin feels great, and it's and I'm not just saying that because I love the soap. My friend Lucas over there sent me some samples, and I'm really enjoying them. And another great part of it is that they are veteran-owned and understand the struggle and transition from military to civilian life. So they donate a portion of their profits to homeless veterans. So you're also contributing to a good cause. And when you go and buy this soap on their website, herosoapcompany.com, put in exploding, and you will get a discount. So you can't go wrong. Check it out. Just try a little sampler, and they have some great scents. Homemade fragrances. Today's episode is going to be about the psychology of conspiracy theories, as I said earlier, and Alan and I were talking about the prevalence of conspiracies now, and where's the truth and where's not the truth, and what's the psychology behind the people that are promoting some of these things. And we're not talking about actual conspiracies. We're talking about theorists, and we're talking about the prevalence of these theories that seem to be being spread fairly rampantly across social media and what might lie behind that. So I hope you enjoy this talk. And here he is, ALAN LIEBERT.
Thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah, man. It's great, man. You know, you're the resident therapist.
Well, I'm lucky. I'm a lucky guy.
Yeah, you really are. So am I to have met you, because we get to talk about all kinds of cool stuff that you know, most therapists don't really probably talk about too much in their practice. Let me read, and this is just right out of Wikipedia, and it's a definition of a conspiracy theory. It's an explanation for an event or situation that invokes a conspiracy by sinister and powerful groups, often political in motivation, when other explanations are more probable. The term has a pejorative connotation, implying that the appeal to a conspiracy is based on prejudice or insufficient evidence. Conspiracy theories resist falsification and are reinforced by circular reasoning. Both evidence against the conspiracy and an absence of evidence for it are reinterpreted as evidence of its truth, whereby the conspiracy becomes a matter of faith rather than something that can be proved or disproved. Research suggests that conspiracist ideation, belief in conspiracy theories, can be psychologically harmful or pathological, and that it is correlated with psychological projection paranoia and Machiavellianism. Psychologists attribute finding a conspiracy where there is none to a mental illness called illusory pattern perception. Conspiracy theories, once limited to fringe audiences, have become commonplace in mass media, emerging as a cultural phenomenon of the late 20th and early 21st centuries. And that is their definition. And I just wanted to read one other little thing because this is sort of a qualification. Conspiracy theory is not simply a conspiracy. So it's a theory, but not, because there are conspiracies. There are actual covert plots planned and or carried out.
What do they call it? What do they call it? Illusory perceptive?
Illusory pattern perception. I've noticed a surge in conspiracy theories, and I know a few people that are in that sort of category. There's a lot of talking about they. I always ask, who is they?
Are those people?
Yeah, and they're like, or then they'll say maybe the government. I'm like, well, who? Can you give me a name? Can you, and it's always like a tough discussion because like this was talking about the evidence against it becomes the evidence for it. It's like, because you can't really pin it down, that actually verifies its existence. That's how good they are. They are. My feeling is it's a way to make the unknown and the fear of the unknown into something known, even if you don't know the specifics of supposedly who it is. At least it explains there's a reason. It isn't just chaos or confusion or a lack of focus.
Or it may be a possibility of creating a mythological story to cover the chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And the story is the illusory pattern perception is what they indicated in what you read would be that they create a story in order to cover up. So the story becomes a fact versus it being, an illusion or a myth. I think it goes to the fact of, when you make something concrete that isn't concrete, it is illusory.
There must be some feeling of safety in making something concrete, even though it's a scary thing that's happening usually to the person. It's like, oh, there's this group of people who are trying to do X, Y, and Z and destroy this and the other thing. But that is actually more comforting to do that than to not know why things are the way they are.
That's right. I think what happens is that you end up relying on your faith and the other person, and that gives you the feeling that it's true.
I'm just amazed at some of the things that are out there in the culture that people believe that are so far fetched. You can't even imagine that somebody would grasp onto it.
There's a thing called Scott's law, and Scott's law, it's a very opaque theory, which is that in Scott's law, what happens is there's a transaction that happens between people, and originally the people are the most important part of the transaction. But once there's a problem in the transaction, the focus shifts so that the transaction is more important and the people become secondary. And I think the transaction in conspiracy theory is what we're talking about, or conspiracies, is the transaction of the information becomes the most important, and the cognitive abilities to be able to discern whether it's factual or has some real-time benefit becomes secondary. So your cognitive abilities become less than, because the transaction of the material or the story becomes concrete, becomes almost like a chair or a table or a light bulb. Does that make sense?
It does. It does to me. I hope people listening, it makes sense to them too.
Right. So oftentimes you'll find people that have paranoid schizophrenia. There's an element of the paranoia that's actually true. And the element could be that they saw something and they created a story around it, and their fear, their feeling tone is filled with fear. And so the story they're creating embodies that fear, but there's an element of something that happened that's you build the story around, or the paranoia around.
Was thinking about how far it can go, and we talk about the one that was the most ridiculous and horrific to me in recent history was the Pizzagate thing, where the information that there was a pizza parlor that was brokering babies to feed to people or something. Hillary
I don't know.
Clinton, and somebody went in there and killed somebody
Hmm.
based on this belief that
Mm-hmm.
was just absolutely the most absurd thing you could ever imagine.
Right. So what does that tell you about, in terms of the pressure that we're experiencing with the pandemic and the not knowing, which we've talked about prior, and now we have the not knowing with the political? Over a period of time, a lot of the foundations of our country have been challenged. As you know, the church has been challenged um, because of issues around that. The family has become challenged. So people don't rely on the family as much as they used to. So you have the church and the family, two tenets that we relied on during challenging times, are not as focused and not as
Yeah.
secure.
And also,
Right.
economic security is not like it
And
used to
economic
be.
security is another issue. And the other issue now is government. So government isn't as secure. And it used to be the police. The police were a secure, safe place to keep the order, and that's changed. So what we're looking at is, if you look at all of this as a dream, this dream would mean that things need to be straightened out pretty fast. Would be a cautionary dream. You hope it wouldn't be a predictive dream, but a cautionary dream, that there is something wrong and I need to pay attention to it. Instead, what we're getting is people fighting each other and not using their cognitive abilities to get attuned with what is going to be most benefit for the country.
Or an agreement on what that would be, which
That's
is
right.
really the scariest part, is that the inability to agree and the entrenching yourself in a belief system that's unshakable, and not being open to having really a discussion and a way to mitigate the problems that everyone's having. It's like that idea of like, well, my way is the way, and if you don't do that, you're a threat and you need to be stopped.
That's right. And that's what I mean, because you don't have that insight because no matter what is said, you have to be a true believer.
I guess that's where the security comes, having a really strong belief. So when it's all these insecure situations in almost every single category of life right now, that a belief is all you can really have as security. It's like a mental tattoo. It's
Mm-hmm.
just there, and it's permanent in the
Mm-hmm.
mind.
So how you see that in people is people are more anxious. There's more depression. There's more worry. And all of it is really, there's real reasons for it. It's not like these are symptoms based on intrapsychic or interpersonal or family systems issues or medical illnesses issues. These are sociological issues that we're dealing with now.
Well, I like to think that things come in cycles, and this is just a really strong, like I'm hoping we're hitting the peak of this type of a feeling, and then we'll
Mm-hmm.
come to something else.
Right.
It's almost like, the earth kind of breathes, and this is a certain breath that's lasting a while, and it doesn't feel very good or solid or safe. And I'm not sure, how it's gonna play out, because we're dealing with some dangerous things. But I'd like to think that the survival instinct in human beings and resilience is going to win out over, for lack of a better word, stupidity.
Non-reality. You hope it wins out over non-reality.
Yeah, that's a better way to say it.
So in terms of conspiracy, in this instance, what we have is you have blogging, right? And you have stories over the internet, and some of these stories are just fabricated stories. And you have the Russians supposedly infiltrating our system again and putting things out there. And that is conspiracy.
That's an actual conspiracy right
That's
there.
right. That's right.
Yeah.
We have the intel committees are saying, yes, it's true. We have people not paying attention to it, and people aren't taking it seriously. And there's a sense of, oh, it'll be taken care of. Because so we're used to things in the United States being united and things working out. Whereas in this instance, we're in a phase of ununited states, where the United States are becoming ununited and be caught up in us versus them. Or as Martin Buber used to say, I thou.
Sometimes if I really think about it, I can get really scared.
Yeah.
And
me
then
too.
other times I feel very hopeful because I talk to certain people and they're seeing what I'm seeing, and I'm like, oh, okay. But is that just my tiny circle of like-minded people? And there's more of people that think a different way and that are more destructive. I mean, I don't really know. So I'm having to have a little bit more hope and faith about these things that maybe than I've ever had, just as my own survival.
Well, of
Maybe I'm being
course.
delusional. I don't know. I just feel like I sort of rely on resiliency as the major force in human survival, that we're able to adapt.
And I think that that's what we're all having to do. I think we're all having to conjure up our internal resources because things seem very out of control. So where does conspiracy fit into all of what we're talking about? I mean, conspiracy can also be misrepresenting things.
Mm-hmm.
It can also be mixed messages. So when you give a mixed message, that means two different messages at the same time, right? When you give a mixed message, how does that affect people? Does that breed more conspiracy or more uncertainty?
Does in my mind, if I hear two things that are conflicted and I'm like, is one more important? Are they both true somehow?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe neither one is true. And certainly when it comes to, and I know we're talking about the pandemic a little bit here, is the information on that seems I'm getting a lot of mixed information. And it
Mm-hmm.
seems like the bottom line is nobody really knows for sure about a lot of it. I was reading about a genetic component, possibly, that why some people get it really, the virus really bad, and others don't. And is it a genetic thing? Does it have to do with blood type? There's so many theories getting thrown out there that, I'm basically just going, I don't know. There's no real solid information that you can grasp onto, and that seems really scary. So, you know, um, that's like a thing we're just living with right now. This possibility of dying, which is sort of the ultimate fear. And I know plenty of people that just don't buy the whole thing. They don't think it's real.
Yeah, that's right.
And even though there's evidence that it is. I know a guy who he did one of those conspiracy videos, and he put music to it, this sort of ominous music, and he drives to this hospital, and he's looking at all the tents that are set up for testing, and there's nobody there. And he's saying, look at all this stuff they're doing to make us think that this exists when it doesn't. There's actually nobody here. Where's the problem? Where's the disease?
Mm-hmm.
Now that, oh, look, there's security guards are looking at me. Let's say you're absolutely 100% correct on what you're saying, which didn't make sense to me, but why are you doing this anyway? Like, let's say
Mm-hmm.
you're right. Are you helping yourself or someone else
Mm-hmm.
to just frighten them?
Mm-hmm.
Or is there a rescuing sort of megalomaniacal kind of feeling of being the person that knows as opposed to the person that doesn't know? Is there a charge that somebody gets, a feeling of power and of abilities beyond what the other people have? And
Mm-hmm.
is that based on feeling actually kind of small inside, and maybe your life isn't working, and this is a way to make yourself feel more important?
We're storytelling creatures, and so that's a big part of what we do with each other is tell stories. And I guess to conspire is to make a decision and focus in on a specific topic and create a story around that, what that is. You see this with people with all sorts of different issues. You see that in families when there's an identified patient and there's a story around that patient. When that identified patient is able to not have to hold the family feelings or dynamics or feeling tone or stories, then they get better.
That's interesting. See, I have this theory. It's
Okay.
not a conspiracy theory, it's just a personal theory, that because the people I know that are really into this stuff, and this is a generalization, but they don't seem like very content, fulfilled people. And when you look at the videos, there's a sadness to it, and I think I think a lot of people that are personally unfulfilled and unhappy gravitate toward this stuff sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's true 100%. It probably is not, but it just seems like it's a perfect place to go when your own personal life isn't feeling enough.
That's right. I think that that's absolutely true. And so, with people that have certain sort of psychological disorders, there becomes a fantasied self, a self that connects to different parts of a person. And when that fantasy self becomes challenged, the person has to experience this internal stress or anxiety. And then they either have to leave the situation and go somewhere else to start over again, or they have to convince the other person whatever they're wanting doesn't make any sense. In a certain way, in that dynamic, that symptom complex of translating the fantasy, the illusory self versus a concrete self, that has structure in the personality. In that transition, the person has an automatic reflex arc to make up a story to cover the situation. You find this with people with dementia and Alzheimer's as well, where they confabulate. Well, they will make up a story around something, and you can kind of see there's an element of it that's true, but you also know that there's a big part of it that isn't. So that's certainly a part of the way our mind works in order to continue to organize conceptual reality. But it also is illusory. We build our life to control our sense of vulnerability. And we have these things in our life that give us a sense of stableness. So when those are challenged, either intrapsychically, cognitively, or in terms of cultural, sociological issues, that can be very scary.
The search for an answer it's a big drive. I got to find out why things are this way, and I don't care what the answer is. I need one. And I always wonder, how do you, and not you personally, but how does one talk to somebody who appears to have a set of beliefs that are obviously not accurate or based on fact? How do you talk to those people? It's
different in psychotherapy than in
yes.
the world.
Yes. In the world. I'm talking about in the world. In psychotherapy, they're there to get better, and they want to have things illuminated. But there was a guy that I knew. He put up do you remember that there was a couple? I guess it was in St. Louis, and they came out
I know who they
guns,
are.
And there was some Black Lives Matter people that had done something to their gate.
They'd walk down the street. The gate was open.
Something.
I've been down that street when I lived there.
Oh, okay. So this guy I knew put something up on his, I guess it was his Facebook page, about how this was these were actors in order to portray conservatives in this certain way, and they didn't exist, as it wasn't a real event. Literally, like, the next day, these people that don't exist, that are actors, are on the news being interviewed, talking about what they did. But in that moment, he believed that it had to be not a real thing. It's like no evidence, just this can't be real because whatever the reason was. How do you get through to somebody like that? You can't.
Now we also have the not knowing of, are we going to be here as a country? Are we going to be integrated like we've been before? Or are we going to be segregated again into factions?
Well, right now it's the second one.
It is the second. That's right.
Yeah, it felt like I when I was a kid and much younger person, that most of the country wanted the same things. The only sort of decision was how you go about getting them. And now it does seem like that people actually want a different country in a sense.
I think what's really important is that we find some semblance of a consensual reality, whether you do it within just yourself, within your family, within your friends, to find something that you can all agree on and employ that to motivate you to get through this time. Our country, certainly most of us, have not gone through anything like this before. Whereas we had the Spanish flu, we had the Depression, we had World War I, we had World War II, we had Pearl Harbor, we had 9/11 was only one area of the country.
Mm-hmm.
So there are other areas of the country that didn't feel it.
And it wasn't lasting. It was.
Yeah, I was in Arkansas, and I heard people say, "Hey, look, I don't care what they do on the east or west coast as long as they don't touch Arkansas." So there's all different sorts of feelings about that. But in terms of a country, and this is a worldview now, because the whole world is being impacted by this. And when people go back to, okay, we're going to build herd immunity, all the research is indicating so far that there isn't herd immunity. All of that makes us wonder about how we are genetically with something like this.
Yeah, it's almost like, the intensity of those events that you talked about. It's like a war with an invisible enemy.
It's a war with an invisible enemy. That's right.
And all the insecurity that comes with that of, am I personally, or my people, my friends, my loved ones, going to be attacked by this invisible enemy, and is this visible enemy going to? It's already destroying, economic lives as well as human life. It's doing that. It's doing a lot of destruction just by the unknown of it and the insecurity. It really does feel like we're living in a war zone, but it's, you don't see the thing that's attacking, and you don't know when it's going to attack.
Right. That's right. That's right.
These are happy times, huh?
Well, they're challenging times, right?
Sure are.
Every generation has had to face something. It's like when you have a medical illness, you have to, and we've talked about mine in the past. I had to make a decision. Okay, am I going to let this illness take over me, or am I going to still live my life and as long as I can bring this illness with me? And so I've been fortunate enough in my case to be able to do that and be able to sit here with you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it draws us into that place of internal strength and integrity and our resources, our internal resources, in order to keep things together and keep going. What would we do if all of a sudden we had to resort back to covered wagons? How many of us could handle that? But the people crossing the United States in those days, in the frontier, they were on covered wagons. They didn't live as long, but they did make that journey. And some lived and some didn't. I think the other element of it, if I'm not waxing too poetic, which is that our country has been so used to leisure life, and entertainment has been such a big part of our lives.
Ease, comfort, goods and services at your beck and call. Lavishness really is what it is.
And this is a different time. You have people in every walk of life who's going their work and their steadfastness to take care of their family and their loved ones is being challenged.
It's kind of like when you're sick, you can't wait for it to be 6 months down the road when you're not sick. Or if you're somebody that's just, let's say you just got dumped by the person you love the most, and they don't want you anymore, and you're going to be okay, but you just really don't want to go through
you don't want to go through the suffering.
Yeah, you just like go, oh man, let's make it 6 months from now. Can we just do that? That's sort of where I'm at. I want it to be down the road, and I'm also like, I've been patient. This is 6 months already. Let's go.
It certainly has brought up what Ernest Becker wrote about in his book, The Denial of Death.
My favorite book.
Is it your favorite book?
Yes.
What did you like about it?
I like that it was, and I actually did an episode on it with a psychologist named Kirk Schneider.
Okay.
And he had turned my friend, who's his cousin, onto the book, who turned it on to me. And he said to him when he handed him the book, I'm going to give you this, but you're playing with fire.
Yes.
And what I loved about it was the raw honesty.
Yes.
And the open-endedness of make up your own mind, but here's some things that I see as being true. And the idea that I sort of condensed that book into that we're all afraid of death. We don't want it. So we do things as human beings to become immortal. It could be, forms of power, having a lot of children, fame, money, or even, sort of on the more negative side, conquering other people, all kinds of stuff. And he really was not afraid to look all that stuff, dead in the eye. And it wasn't pretty, and it wasn't necessarily ugly, but it was really raw. And you just felt when you read that book that he was saying something that others weren't saying.
I think it's a very important book. And I think it really does rule a lot of what's going on. And what's happening is now people are having to face what we do, how we do things, what works for us, and we're having to make adjustments psychologically, intrapsychically about how we can keep moving forward.
There's a great moment in the movie, the very first Night of the Living Dead. I don't know if you ever saw it.
No, I never saw
It
it.
was a black and white horror movie back in the 60s. And basically dead people come alive, and they're the Walking Dead, and they're killing and eating. I think they're eating them, or they're just killing them and killing people. And there's this house with all these people that have in the zombie type people are attacking, and it's dead people from many generations. You see like a guy who looks like Caesar and a guy in a cavalry uniform, but they're dead. And so they were attacking the house, and this woman starts freaking out, and she goes, "There's got to be somebody we could call." It was the funniest moment in that movie. Absolute, apocalyptic, crazy terror. And that was her thought. There's got to be somebody we can call. And you know what? There's nobody to call.
I think that moment is what we're trying to evade. That moment of feeling free floating in life, even though our planet is floating in life and floating in the atmosphere, we're trying to emotionally knock into that place where we're just floating along without having any sort of controls.
Mm-hmm.
So the more we go back to what we normally do, and the more we do the things we used to do, it brings back, it opens up those brain receptors of those patterns. So we have we feel more comfortable and more safe because we're doing what we used to do.
Do you think that this conspiracy thing is going to keep going for a while? Because I do. I think it's going to actually.
I think the more challenged people are, that the fear initiates a way to block anything that causes more fear. So your belief is one way. Let's say your belief is A. Anything that can make A feel more insecure means that you have to have a story to block that in your own way of rationalizing that. Anna Freud had a book called The Ego and the Mechanism of Defense. She was Sigmund Freud's daughter. She was a child psychologist, child analyst. But she talked about denial through word. So you don't say the word, you deny the word. Denial through act. You deny acting a certain way in response to something. You have externalization, where you externalize things, which is projective identification or projecting on someone else. You act as if it's embodied in them, it's embedded in them, but it's really you. So you have all these defense mechanisms that create different ways of fending off the anxiety so we can stay whole. I think in terms of conspiracy and what we're talking about and the challenges we're facing in our culture right now, that these defense mechanisms are becoming more apparent and becoming, instead of just being intrapsychic defense mechanisms, they're becoming cross-cultural defense mechanisms, cross-sociological defense mechanisms, or different factions of our society are denying through act, denying through word. They don't want to know something that's contradictory to what they believe and all their family beliefs. And like the roots of a tree, all the roots are based on this idea. All the roots support itself in order to keep the tree stable. So that's the way people's frame of reference and the way they think about things happen and stay cogent. And I think that the concept of conspiracy and mixed messages are certainly in relation to the amount of fear that we have in our culture.
It does require some homework to look into these things and see what the truth is, because like you were saying earlier, there usually is some seed of truth in some of it. And that's how cults work. Actually, they take religious cults, they'll take some very true kind of spiritual and religious things and build all this other stuff around it that isn't. So, there's a certain comfort in the true stuff. And then people will assume, well, if, that is true, then why wouldn't the other stuff be true, rather than examining that maybe this thing is balanced on the head of a pin?
There's the connectivity. So people who felt unconnected or isolated, or feel isolated within themselves or not integrated within themselves,
Yeah.
find something bigger than them that they can connect to, and within that, it's a healing. It's like healing a wound, and they have that, and so that's where the faith comes in of staying within the boundaries of whatever that structure is of decision making, beliefs and choices, and rites and rituals within that group. Um, Develops a sort of firmness, and that keeps individuals from feeling isolated and
Yeah.
alone. They're together.
It's like a surrogate family that,
That's right.
and,
That's right.
and in real families, when there's dysfunction, there's still love and connection. It's just dysfunctional, and people come out of those families, damaged in some way. But a cult or religion like that would also serve the same purpose. We've solved it again, Alan.
Did we? How we do today?
We'll let the audience find out
That's right.
for us. We'll let them listen and see. I always enjoy talking to you.
Yeah, it's always great, and it's always a privilege, and I'm so happy to have the opportunity.
Yeah, it must be kind of nice to just talk about stuff that isn't involved in your actual day-to-day.
It's lovely. It's another opportunity to share some thoughts I have on things in the way that I experience the world.
And hopefully we've helped somebody today to clarify some things. Who knows?
Absolutely.
Well, thanks so much, and we'll do another one of these when we come up with our next topic.
I look forward to it.
Yes, me too. Thanks for listening in, folks, to The Exploding Human, and another thanks to ALAN LIEBERT. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, The Exploding Human with Bob Nickman, and visit my website, theexplodinghuman.com. And don't forget to get your soap from theherosoapcompany.com. And type in exploding at the end of placing your order, and you will receive a discount. And remember, a portion of their profit does go to serving homeless veterans. So, good cause in addition to a great product. Thank you for listening in, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.